The sky above the scorched plains outside Wall Maria did not merely darken, but seemed to bruise, turning a violent shade of purple that defied the natural order of this world. There was no warning thunder or shifting winds to signal the arrival of the anomaly, only a sudden tearing sound that pierced the eardrums of the Survey Corps riders scattered across the formation. A streak of vantablack matter, wreathed in emerald lightning, tore through the cloud layer with a velocity that turned the air itself into a weapon. It was not a rock or a shell fired from the enemy nations across the sea, but something fluid and alive, a screaming tear in the fabric of reality that slammed into the earth less than a mile from the rear guard. The impact did not send up a plume of dirt and stone like a cannonball would, but instead splashed outward like a drop of ink falling into clear water, infecting the ground instantly. The vibration traveled through the soles of the horses and the boots of the soldiers, a deep resonant thrum that felt more like a heartbeat than a tremor. Section Commander Hanji Zoe was the first to pull their horse to a violent halt, eyes wide behind goggles that reflected the rising smoke. The smoke was not grey or white, but a toxic, hissing black mist that crawled along the ground against the wind. From within the crater, a shape began to rise, but it lacked the geometry of a human or the grotesque, exaggerated proportions of a titan. It was a shifting nightmare of viscosity, a pile of sludge that moved with predatory intent, pulling itself together into tendrils that lashed at the air as if tasting the nitrogen and the fear. A 15-meter class titan, drawn by the noise, lumbered toward the crash site, its mindless grin stretching wide as it sensed prey. The scouts watched in paralyzed silence, expecting the giant to trample the strange arrival, but the laws of biology they had studied for decades were about to be rewritten. The titan reached down a massive hand to scoop up the black mass, but before the skin could make contact, the sludge reacted. It did not retreat. It exploded upward. Spears of hardened black fluid shot out with the speed of a rifle round, piercing the titan's hand and anchoring the symbiote to the steaming flesh. The titan shrieked a sound that no titan had ever made, a sound of genuine panicked pain. The symbiote detested the intense heat radiating from the titan's body. The steam that usually evaporated from their wounds acted like acid to the alien entity, but the entity was starving and desperate and furious. Instead of fleeing the heat, it attacked the source. The black substance flowed up the titan's arm like a reverse waterfall, burrowing under the skin to escape the sunlight, while simultaneously ripping the muscle fibers apart to ventilate the heat. The giant stumbled, its regenerative abilities failing to keep up with a parasite that ate biomass for fuel. The scouts watched in horror as the titan began to dissolve not into steam, but into gore, the black sludge thrashing violently as it consumed the marrow and rejected the boiling blood. It was a clash of two incompatible biological imperatives. The titan sought to consume humanity, an engine of heat and regeneration. The symbiote sought a host, a perfect bond, but found only a furnace. In its rejection, the symbiote became a butcher. It tore the nape of the titan out from the inside, tossing the steaming chunk of flesh onto the grass before slithering out of the collapsing carcass. The alien mass hissed, steaming, and reduced in size, having burned half its mass just to survive the encounter. It pooled on the ground, a sentient oil slick, rippling with eyes that formed and dissolved in seconds, looking for something cooler, something smaller, something that could carry it without burning it alive. The Survey Corps had trained to fight giants, but they had no protocol for a monster that could turn their enemies into hollow husks in seconds. The black puddle began to slide across the grass, moving with terrifying speed directly toward the stunned formation of soldiers. The black fluid moved faster than a galloping horse, a fact that the rearguard realized only when the substance overtook the rearmost mount. It did not strike like a predator pouncing, but rather surged underneath the animal like a sudden tide. The horse shrieked as the symbiote lashed upward, wrapping around the beast's legs and pulling it down into the grass with bone-snapping force. The rider, a young recruit named Dieter, was thrown clear, tumbling through the dust and clutching his rifle. He scrambled to his feet, screaming for help, but the chaos of the formation meant his voice was lost under the thunder of hooves and the shouting of orders. Dieter watched as the black mass abandoned the horse, leaving the animal with a broken spine, and flowed toward him. He raised his rifle, firing a single shot that punched a hole through the center of the rushing slime. The hole closed instantly. The entity did not feel pain from kinetic impacts of this scale. It lunged, covering the distance in a heartbeat, and slammed into Dieter's chest. It did not bite him. It poured into him. The black slime forced its way through the fibers of his uniform into his nose, his mouth, and the open pores of his sweating skin. Dieter gagged his hands, clawing at his own face as his vision went dark. His consciousness was not extinguished, but shoved into the backseat of his own mind, screaming against a sudden alien roaring that demanded sustenance. The transformation was grotesque and rapid. Dieter's body convulsed, his muscles tearing and re-knitting instantly as they were flooded with alien biomass. His height increased by a foot. His jaw unhinged and stretched wide, revealing rows of jagged needle-like teeth that dripped with a thick saliva. The Survey Corps soldiers who had turned back to help their comrades skid to a halt, their horses rearing in terror at the scent of the thing that now stood where Dieter had been. This was not a titan. It was a man encased in a living suit of oil and hatred. Levi Ackerman signaled for the formation to split, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the threat. He had seen titans of every shape and size, but this was different. The silhouette was human, but the movement was fluid, entirely lacking the lumbering weight of a giant. The creature let out a screech that sounded like tearing metal and leapt. It did not run. It propelled itself with tendrils that shot out from its back, latching onto the ground and pulling it forward at velocities that rivaled the ODM gear. A scout swung in low, aiming to slice the nape of the neck, the standard kill shot for anything that threatened humanity. The blade struck the black shoulder and sparked. The symbiote had hardened its skin, instantly reacting to the incoming threat with a density that shattered the ultra-hard steel. The scout lost his momentum, hanging in the air for a fraction of a second too long. A black tendril shot from the creature's chest, impaling the soldier through the torso and whipping him into the ground with enough force to liquefy his organs. Hanji Zoe watched from the flank, mind racing. The creature had hardened its skin like the armored titan or the female titan, but the transition was fluid, localized only to the point of impact. It was efficient, it was intelligent, and it was small. Hitting a 15-meter target was one thing. Hitting a man-sized target moving at 60 miles per hour was another. Levi launched himself from his horse, his movement a blur of rotation. He did not aim for the nape. He aimed for the limbs. He spun through the air blades drawn, slicing through the creature's knees. The black substance severed easily enough under Levi's immense force, but the legs did not fall away. Veins of black webbing shot across the gap, pulling the severed limbs back together in mid-air. The creature stumbled but did not fall. It turned its white teardrop-shaped eyes towards Levi and snarled. Hunger. The word echoed in the minds of those closest, not as a sound, but as a psychic pressure. The symbiote was starving. The metabolism required to maintain this form in a high-gravity, high-sunlight environment was burning through Dieter's nutrient reserves in seconds. It needed phenethylamine. It needed brains. It lunged at Levi, ignoring the other scouts. Levi dodged, using the gas burst to shift his trajectory mid-flight. The creature's claws raked the air where his head had been. Levi spun behind it, slicing the creature's back open from neck to waist. The wound gaped, revealing not steam and bone but raw muscle and the terrified face of Dieter buried deep within the black sludge. The boy was still alive, his eyes rolling back in his head, his mouth open in a silent scream. "Don't kill the host," Levi shouted, his voice cutting through the panic. "It's wearing him." The order complicated the battlefield. If it was a Titan, they would kill it without hesitation. But a human used as a puppet fell under different rules. The scouts switched tactics. Instead of lethal strikes, they aimed to immobilize. Hooks were fired, not at the creature, but around it, creating a web of steel wire. The creature slashed at the wires, severing them with ease, its claws sharper than the blades. It was learning. It understood the technology instantly. It saw the gas canisters and realized they were the source of propulsion. A tendril lashed out not at a soldier, but at a horse carrying supply crates. It smashed the crate, grabbing a canister of gas. With terrifying intuition, it crushed the canister. The explosion of pressurized gas knocked 3 scouts out of the air. Hanji saw the reaction. It reacted to the noise of the explosion. It flinched. The blast had not hurt it physically, but the sonic impact had disrupted its cohesion. The surface of the black suit rippled violently, losing its solidity for a second. Sound. It hates sound. Hanji grabbed a flare gun, loading her acoustic signal round usually used for long-distance communication. Hanji fired directly at the creature's feet. The flare exploded with a deafening high-pitched shriek. The effect was immediate. The creature roared in agony, its form destabilizing completely. The black sludge tried to peel away from Dieter's body, thrashing like a wounded animal. Dieter collapsed to his knees, coughing up black bile. Levi saw the opening. He did not cut. He kicked. He slammed his boot into the creature's chest, knocking the wind out of the host and sending them sprawling into the dirt. More flares. Keep up the noise. The scouts surrounded the writhing entity, firing signal rounds into the ground around it, creating a wall of sound. The symbiote retracted, pulling itself tight against Dieter's skin, trying to hide from the sonic assault. It became dormant, its surface turning rigid and dull like dried tar. It was a stalemate. They had incapacitated it, but they could not separate it from the boy without risking his life. Levi landed beside the body blade still drawn. He looked at the black coating that pulsed faintly like a dying lung. "We can't leave it here," Levi said, "and we can't take it back to the city without knowing what it is." Hanji was already on the ground examining the substance with a manic intensity. "It's not evaporating," Hanji noted, touching the surface with a gloved finger. "Titans dissolve when the main body is severed or incapacitated. This thing is stable. It's matter, not energy. It's a parasite. We take it, restrain it with everything we have, muzzle it, bind the limbs. If it wakes up, we hit it with thunder spears. The risk was astronomical. Bringing an unknown biological weapon inside the walls was a violation of every safety protocol the Survey Corps had. But the potential intelligence was worth the risk. If this was a new Marlian weapon, they needed to understand it. If it was something else, they needed to understand it even more. They bound the creature in chains, usually reserved for capturing Titans, wrapping the body in layers of heavy canvas and steel cable. They loaded Dieter's unconscious form into the back of a supply wagon. Levi sat in the wagon, his eyes never leaving the prisoner. Hanji rode alongside, sketching furiously in a notebook, detailing the physiology, the reaction to sound, the lack of steam. The journey back to Trost district was tense. The sun beat down on the plains, and the heat seemed to agitate the dormant symbiote. The black skin rippled occasionally, testing the bonds, but the exhaustion of the host kept it subdued. Dieter was dying. His body was withering away the nutrients sucked out of his marrow to fuel the suit's regeneration. By the time the wall came into view, Dieter looked like a man of 80, his skin grey and papery. The arrival at Trost was met with confusion. The garrison stationed on the wall saw the signal flares for a captured target and opened the gates expecting a small Titan or a prisoner of war. Instead, they saw the Survey Corps ride in with a grim urgency surrounding a single wagon. The civilians were cleared from the streets. Rumors spread instantly. A demon, a plague, a new Titan that looked like a man. The convoy did not stop at the barracks. It went straight to the old dungeon beneath the military headquarters, a place designed to hold political dissidents and criminals, not monsters. They threw Dieter into the deepest cell, a stone box with no windows and heavy iron bars. They chained him to the wall. Hanji set up perimeter lighting, placing large oil lamps around the cell. The fire seemed to make the black substance recoil. Heat and sound. Those were the keys. Hanji ordered a rotation of guards armed with flare guns and torches. No one was to touch the prisoner. No one was to speak to it. Levi remained at the entrance of the dungeon, leaning against the damp stone wall. He did not like this. The air in the dungeon felt heavy, charged with a static electricity that made the hair on his arm stand up. Inside the cell, the symbiote began to wake. It sensed the darkness. It liked the darkness. The sun was gone. The oppressive radiation that burned its kin was absent here. But the host was finished. Dieter's heart was beating erratically, a flutter of a dying bird. The symbiote felt no malice toward the boy, only a cold biological pragmatism. The suit had protected him as long as it could, but the energy requirements of the earlier battle had depleted the biomass. It needed a new vessel. It sensed them. Humans. Hundreds of them in the building above. But they were weak, fragile. They would burn out just like this one. Then it sensed something else. Deep in the city miles away, but burning like a beacon in the psychic spectrum, there was a power source. It was vast, ancient. It felt like the Titan it had killed on the plains, but different, contained, focused, a human who held the sun inside him. The symbiote did not know the name Eren Yeager, but it knew the signature of a perfect host, a being that could regenerate endlessly, a being that could generate the mass required for a true bond. The hunger flared again sharper this time. The symbiote detached itself from Dieter's face pooling on the floor. Dieter gasped one final rattle of breath and slumped forward dead in his chains. The guards outside the cell saw the movement. They raised their torches, shouting for the commander. The black puddle ignored them. It did not try to break the iron bars. It did not need to. It flowed like water. It slid between the stones of the floor, finding the cracks in the foundation. It poured itself into the drainage system of the dungeon, disappearing from view just as Hanji burst into the room. The cell was empty, save for the desiccated corpse of the recruit. The chains held nothing but bones and skin. "Where is it?" Hanji screamed, grabbing the bars. The guard stammered, pointing at the floor. It melted. It just melted. Panic spread through the headquarters. The lockdown order was given, but it was too late. The entity was in the walls. It moved through the pipes, through the gaps in the mortar, sliding through the infrastructure of Trost like a virus in a bloodstream. It moved with purpose. It was hunting the beacon. Eren Yeager sat in a holding room in the upper levels of the barracks. He was currently under review by the military police, his recent actions having caused as much fear as hope. Mikasa Ackerman stood by the window, watching the street, her posture rigid. Armin Ahler sat at the table, reading a book on history, trying to find a precedent for the current political turmoil. Eren felt a headache coming on. a sharp throbbing pain at the base of his skull. He rubbed his neck, wincing. It felt like someone was watching him, not from the door, but from the inside of his own head. "Something is wrong," Eren muttered, standing up. Mikasa turned immediately, her hand going to the blade at her hip. "What is it?" she asked. Eren looked at the floor. The stone tiles were damp. A black stain was spreading from the corner of the room, oozing out of a ventilation grate. It looked like oil, but it moved against the slope of the floor. It was moving toward him. Armin stood up, knocking his chair over. "What is that? Is that Titan blood?" "It's not evaporating," Eren said, backing away. The instinct to bite his hand to draw blood and summon the attack Titan surged in him. But he hesitated. Transforming inside the barracks would kill everyone in the building. The black sludge rose up, forming a pillar of viscous fluid that took the vague shape of a head. White patches formed into eyes. A mouth ripped open, revealing a tongue that tasted the air. "Eren." The voice did not come from the mouth. It came from the air itself, a raspy, distorted vibration that rattled the window panes. "Jaeger." Mikasa moved. She was faster than any human had a right to be. She lunged at the creature, her blade slicing through the pillar of slime. The creature split in two, but the halves simply lunged past her, ignoring her completely. They slammed into Eren. The impact knocked him into the wall. The black substance covered him instantly, wrapping around his arms and legs, pinning him to the stone. Mikasa screamed, slashing at the black web, but the substance was hard as diamond now. It had learned from Levi. It knew the Ackerman threat. It hardened its outer shell to protect the integration process. Eren struggled, his eyes wide with terror. He felt the cold intrusion sliding under his shirt into his ears. But then, the intrusion changed. The symbiote touched the Titan spark inside Eren. It touched the coordinate, and it screamed. The contact was not a gentle merging. It was a collision of cosmologies. The Titan power was heat, fire, and will. The symbiote was void, cold, and instinct. The reaction was explosive. Golden lightning erupted from Eren's body, not the usual transformation bolt, but a jagged, chaotic discharge that blew the windows out of the room. The heat was intense. The symbiote burned. It sizzled on Eren's skin, boiling in the sudden rise of body temperature that preceded a shift. But the symbiote was stubborn. It refused to let go. It had found the ultimate battery, and it would not be denied. It dove deeper, burrowing into Eren's flesh, hiding under the muscle to escape the surface heat. It tapped into the regeneration factor, forcing Eren's body to heal the burns as fast as they occurred. It was a torture loop. Burn, heal, burn, heal. Eren roared a sound that was half human, half monster. He bit his hand. The lightning struck the building properly this time, shattering the roof and sending debris raining down on the streets of Trost. The attack Titan formed, but it was wrong. Usually the attack Titan was a creature of skin and muscle, exposed and raw. This Titan rose from the steam, but the steam was trapped. A black sheen covered the Titan's form. The symbiote had expanded, stretching itself thin to cover the 15-meter frame. It was struggling, screaming in silent agony as the Titan's internal temperature cooked it. But it adapted. It forced the Titan to harden, not just the knuckles, but the entire skin. The white armor of the Warhammer or the armored Titan appeared, but it was stained by the symbiote's influence, turning a dark obsidian grey. The creature that stood up in the ruins of the barracks was a nightmare amalgamation. It had the physique of the attack Titan, but its mouth was split wide in a permanent grin filled with needle teeth. Its eyes were not the green emeralds of Eren Jaeger, but large, milky white patches that warped and shifted. Long black tendrils whipped from its back, lashing out at the surrounding buildings. The hybrid roared. The sound shattered glass for 3 blocks. It was the roar of the attack titan, layered with the screech of the alien. Inside the nape, Eren was not in control. He was drowning in a sea of black ink, his memories mixing with the memories of 1 billion hive mind ancestors. He saw planets burning. He saw stars being eaten. He felt a hunger that could swallow the world. Levi and Hanji arrived on the rooftops adjacent to the barracks, just in time to see the transformation. Hanji's goggles slid down her nose. "Incredible," she whispered. "It hijacked the transformation. It's using the Titan energy to fuel its own expansion." Levi drew his blades, his face a mask of cold fury. "It's not Eren anymore," he said. The hybrid turned toward them. It raised a massive hand, and black webbing shot out, covering the distance between the buildings in an instant. The web slammed into the structure where the scout stood, collapsing the wall. Levi and Hanji bailed out into the air, grappling hooks firing. The creature did not pursue. It turned its head toward the wall, toward the outer districts. It sensed more titans, more food. Mikasa pulled herself from the rubble of the barracks room. She was bleeding from a head wound. She looked up at the black giant that used to be Eren. "Eren!" she screamed. The creature paused. The head tilted. The white eye patch narrowed. For a second, the human consciousness surfaced. The creature hit itself in the face, a massive blow that shook the ground. It was fighting for control. "Get out of my head." The voice boomed, amplified by the Titan's vocal cords. It was Eren's voice, but distorted, deep and gurgling. The symbiote fought back. It forced the Titan's arm down. It didn't care about Mikasa. It cared about the heat. It needed to cool down. It needed to feed to replenish the mass it was losing to the constant burning of the Titan body. It turned and leaped. It did not run. It vaulted over the city rooftops, moving with a terrifying spider-like agility that no Titan should possess. It crushed houses under its feet, leaving a trail of black slime that dissolved stone. The alarm bells of Trost began to ring. The garrison cannons turned inward, tracking the beast. They fired. A volley of high explosive shells struck the hybrid's back. The smoke cleared instantly. The obsidian skin was unscratched. The symbiote had absorbed the kinetic impact, dispersing it through the gel layer. The creature spun around and opened its mouth. A black sphere of concentrated sludge formed in its throat. It fired. The projectile hit the wall beneath the cannons and expanded violently, hardening into heavy spikes that impaled the masonry and the cannons alike. It has ranged attacks, Hanji noted, swinging through the air, trying to keep up. This changes the entire doctrine of engagement. The hybrid reached the wall. It did not climb. It ran straight up the vertical surface, claws digging into the stone. It crested the top and disappeared over the other side, vanishing into the territory of the Titans. The Survey Corps had not only failed to contain the threat, they had inadvertently provided it with the most dangerous weapon in humanity's arsenal. The symbiote had the attack titan, and it was hungry. The silence that followed the creature's departure was broken only by the wailing of the injured in the barracks. Levi landed on the wall, looking out over the darkening plains. The trail of the creature was easy to follow, a scar of corruption across the land where the grass had turned grey and died. "We have to hunt it down," Levi said, "before it learns how to use the coordinate." Hanji nodded, hands shaking as she reloaded her blades. "If it figures out it can control other Titans..." Hanji trailed off, not wanting to finish the sentence. "If it controls the Titans," Levi finished, "it won't just eat people. It will eat the world." The sun finally set, plunging the world into darkness. But out on the plains, the nightmare was just waking up. The heat of the day was gone. The cool night air was a balm to the burning symbiote. It was stronger now, faster, and it was alone with a world full of giants that it viewed not as predators, but as livestock. The food chain had just been inverted. The era of titans was ending. The era of symbiosis had begun. The moon over Wall Maria illuminated a landscape that had been transformed into a charnel house, not by war, but by predation. The usual silence of the titan-infested territory was replaced by a wet tearing sound that echoed off the valley walls. The hybrid entity that wore the face of Eren Yeager and the skin of a cosmic parasite moved through the dark with a gait that mocked physics. It did not lumber like the mindless giants that wandered the plains in their eternal daylight stupor. It flowed. The 15-meter behemoth crouched low to the ground, its obsidian knuckles dragging through the dirt, leaving furrows of corrupted earth that refused to grow grass again. It was hunting not for territory or defense, but for caloric density. The symbiote had calculated the metabolic cost of maintaining a titan form, and the math was brutal. To keep the attack titan active without the host burning out within minutes, it required massive amounts of organic fuel. A 10-meter titan sat slumped against a grove of trees dormant in the absence of sunlight. It was a grotesque thing, with an oversized head and spindly limbs. The hybrid approached it silently, the black fluid of its skin dampening the sound of its footsteps. There was no roar, no challenge. The hybrid simply lunged. It pinned the dormant titan against the trees, the impact shattering the timber. The 10-meter giant woke sluggishly, its eyes widening as it registered the predator. It tried to bite, but the hybrid was faster. The venomized attack titan opened its maw, unhinging its jaw to an impossible degree. It did not bite the nape, it bit the face. The sound of crushing bone was sickeningly wet. The symbiote did not just chew it absorbed. Tendrils shot from the hybrid's mouth, driving deep into the victim's throat and chest, digesting the titan from the inside out. Inside the nape of the hybrid, Eren Yeager was screaming. He was floating in a viscous black void that had replaced the cockpit of the titan. His limbs were heavy, pinned by the alien matter that threaded through his nerves. He could feel the symbiote's hunger, as if it were his own, a sharp, scraping pain in his stomach that demanded more flesh. He saw what the creature saw. He felt the joy of the slaughter. "Stop!" Eren roared in the silence of his own mind. They are humans. They are nightmare humans, but they are still people. The symbiote laughed, a soundless vibration that rattled Eren's teeth. "They are meat," the voice whispered. "Biomass. Batteries. We burn so hot, Eren. We need the coolant. We need the fuel." The dormant titan shriveled. Its skin went grey and tight against its bones as the fluids were sucked out of it. Usually, a titan body would evaporate into steam upon death, but the symbiote did not allow the energy to escape into the air. It harvested the steam. It drank the heat. The victim did not vanish. It remained as a mummified husk, a statue of dried leather and bone collapsing into a pile of dust. The hybrid released the corpse and stood up, its body venting a cloud of black smog from the vents along its shoulders. It felt stronger. The intake of titan spinal fluid had done something to the symbiote. It tasted the history in the genetic code. It tasted the paths, miles away atop the jagged ruins of Utgard Castle. Two figures watched the massacre through a pair of binoculars. Rainer Braun lowered the lenses, his hand trembling slightly. Beside him, Bertolt Hoover looked pale, his tall frame hunched against the wind. "It's an abnormal Rainer," said, his voice tight. "It has to be. But I've never seen a titan eat another titan. And I've never seen one that stays solid after death." Bertolt looked at the dark shape moving in the distance. It looked like Eren. He whispered. The structure, the hair. It's the attack titan. But it's wrong. It's wearing armor, but the armor is moving. Reiner's eyes narrowed. If Eren has lost control, if he's turned into some kind of cannibalistic devil, we have to put him down. For the sake of the mission, and for his own sake. That thing is suffering. You can see it in the way it moves. It's twitching. Reiner stood up, the soldier persona warring with the warrior. We engage. We capture the coordinate if we can. If not, we kill the vessel. Are you ready? Bertolt hesitated, looking at the black monster that blended into the night shadows. Reiner, that thing isn't a titan. It feels distinct, like the source of all living matter but corrupted. We should wait for the war chief. Reiner shook his head. By the time Zeke gets here, that thing will have eaten half the giants in the sector, and if it learns to harden its skin permanently, we won't be able to scratch it. We go now. A flash of yellow lightning split the night sky as Reiner leaped from the castle ruins. The transformation was instantaneous. The armored titan hit the ground with a force that shook the valley. The noise attracted the hybrid immediately. The black head snapped around, the white patches of its eyes narrowing into slits. It hissed a sound of pressurized steam escaping a boiler. It recognized the armor. It recognized the challenge. The hybrid abandoned the dried husks of its previous meal and sprinted toward Reiner. It ran on all fours, then transitioned to 2 legs, its movement erratic and terrifying. Reiner braced himself, entering a grappling stance. He was the shield. He was the immovable object. He had stopped cannonballs and blades. He would stop this madness. The hybrid collided with him, not with a solid thud, but with a splashing crash. The black substance on its skin was not solid armor. It was a non-Newtonian fluid. Upon impact, it hardened instantly, absorbing the kinetic energy of the charge, then liquefied again to flow around Reiner's guard. Reiner threw a punch aimed at the hybrid's jaw. The fist connected, sinking into the black slime. But instead of snapping the head back, the slime grabbed Reiner's fist. Thousands of microscopic hooks latched onto the armored plating. Reiner tried to pull back, but he was stuck. The hybrid grinned, its teeth glistening in the moonlight. Got you, the alien voice hissed, overlapping with Eren's roar. The hybrid swung Reiner around, using the armored titan's own weight against him, slamming him into the cliffside. The rock shattered, burying Reiner in debris. But the hybrid did not let go. It crawled on top of him, the black sludge pouring over Reiner's gold armor plates. Reiner panicked. He felt the heat rising. The slime was acidic, or perhaps it was just vibrating at a frequency that destabilized the hardening. He watched in horror as his armor, the hardest substance known to his world, began to soften. The symbiote was deconstructing the crystal lattice, seeking the soft meat underneath. Bertolt saw his friend drowning in the black tide. He had no choice. He bit his hand. The explosion of the colossal titan was usually a nuclear deterrent, a blast that incinerated everything in a blast radius. But Bertolt controlled it, aiming for a partial transformation, a focused burst of steam and force to knock the creature off. The shockwave hit the hybrid broadside. The intense heat of the colossal steam was the one thing the symbiote feared. The creature shrieked, releasing Reiner and leaping backward, shielding its face with black tendrils. It hissed, retreating into the shadows, its skin bubbling and blistering. Reiner scrambled out of the rubble, his armor pitted and scarred. "What is that?" he screamed mentally. "It eats hardening." The hybrid circled them, keeping its distance from the colossal's heat radius. It was learning. Fire bad, heat bad, armor tasty. Eren watched the battle from within the sunken place. He saw Reiner, he saw Bertolt. The betrayal that had shattered his heart weeks ago surged up again. Traitors, he thought. They are the enemy. The symbiote seized on that thought. It fed on the adrenaline and the cortisol spiking in Eren's blood. Enemy, the symbiote echoed. Kill, eat, ever love. The hybrid changed tactics. It reached into the ground, its claws digging deep. It didn't pull up rocks. It pulled up the roots of trees, the earth itself forming a makeshift projectile. It hurled a massive boulder at Bertolt. The colossal was slow. The rock struck the giant in the shoulder, staggering it. Then the hybrid moved. It did not attack the titans directly. It attacked the environment. It lashed out with tendrils, grabbing the ruins of the castle, pulling the stones down, creating a landslide to bury the armored titan. It was fighting with a tactical viciousness that belonged to neither Eren nor a titan. It was fighting like a street brawler who knew how to use every piece of trash in the alley. The Survey Corps arrived on the ridge overlooking the valley, just as the landslide buried Reiner. Levi signaled a halt. The horses were foaming at the mouth, terrified by the scent of the alien predator. Hanji stared through her scope, her mouth agape. "It's fighting the armored and the colossal simultaneously," she said, "and it's winning." Mikasa stepped forward, her face a mask of desperate resolve. "We have to help him." "Help him?" Jan Kirsten muttered, his voice cracking. "Look at that thing, Mikasa. That's not Eren. That's a monster eating monsters. If we go down there, we're just more biomass." Levi drew his blades. "We don't have a choice. If Reiner and Bertolt capture that thing, Marley gets a weapon that can eat the world. If that thing eats Reiner and Bertolt, it becomes unstoppable. We have to intervene. We have to cut Eren out of that suit." The scouts engaged. They flew in on ODM gear, swooping down like hawks. They avoided the hybrid, focusing on distracting the armored titan who was trying to dig himself out. Thunder spears were loaded, but the battlefield was chaotic. The air was thick with dust and black smog. The hybrid sensed the new arrivals. It sensed Mikasa. The bond between Eren and Mikasa was a bright, burning thread in the psychic landscape. The symbiote hesitated. It felt Eren's sudden resistance. "No," Eren shouted inside the mindscape. "Do not touch them," the symbiote snarled. "They are small. They are noisy. They are in the way." Reiner seized the moment of hesitation. He tackled the hybrid again, this time focusing on crushing the legs. The armored titan's fingers locked around the hybrid's knee and squeezed. The bone shattered. The hybrid roared, falling. Reiner raised a fist to smash the nape to kill the host if necessary. But the hybrid's leg did not stay broken. The black fluid rushed to the injury, snapping the bone back into place in a second. Then the symbiote retaliated. Spikes of hardened obsidian erupted from the hybrid's chest, impaling Reiner's arm. The symbiote flowed up the arm again, faster this time. It aimed for the eyes. It covered the armored titan's face, blinding Reiner. Reiner thrashed, destroying the forest around him, but he couldn't get the darkness off. Then the impossible happened. The symbiote began to interface with Reiner's titan. It didn't just want to eat it. It wanted to drive it. Reiner felt his control slipping. His limbs moved without his command. The armored titan stood up, its posture changing from a brawler's hunch to a feral crouch. The black slime spread, covering the gold plates in a web of veins. Hanji screamed from the tree line. "It's infecting the titan. It's taking over the neural link." The venomized armored titan turned toward Bertolt. Reiner was screaming inside his own head, trapped in a passenger seat, just like Eren. The symbiote was piloting two titans at once, stretching its consciousness across the gap, using the physical connection of the slime. The strain was immense. The hybrid body stood still, acting as the router, while the armored titan puppet lunged at the colossal. Bertolt, horrified, kicked his former friend away. The massive limb of the colossal titan sent the venomized armor flying. The connection broke. The slime connecting the two snapped. The armored titan collapsed, the black web dissolving as the symbiote retracted its mass back to the main host. Reiner lay panting, the infection gone, but the terror remaining. The hybrid staggered. Controlling two bodies had drained it. It was overheating. Smoke poured from its mouth. It needed to retreat. It needed to molt. It looked at the scouts. It looked at Mikasa, who was hanging from a branch 10 meters away, her blades drawn, tears in her eyes. "Eren," she whispered. The white eye patch on the hybrid blinked. For a second, the grin faded. The creature let out a low rumble that sounded like a purr or a sob. Then it turned and ran. It launched itself up the cliff face, digging its claws into the stone, scaling the vertical wall in seconds. It disappeared over the ridge, leaving the warriors broken and the scouts traumatized. Back in the silence of the aftermath, Levi landed next to a piece of the black substance that had been severed during the fight. It lay on the rock, twitching, dying without the main body. Levi stomped on it. It squelched like rotten fruit. "This is getting worse," Levi said, wiping titan blood from his face. "It just tried to hijack the armored titan. If it gets to the inner wall, if it touches the king." Hanji picked up a sample with a pair of tongs, dropping it into a glass vial. "It's not just biology," Hanji said, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and scientific awe. "It's invasive. It rewrites the rules of the power of the Titans. Did you see Reiner's armor? It was soft. This thing can undo the hardening. It can undo the walls." The implication hung in the air like a guillotine blade. The walls were made of millions of colossal titans, hardened into stone. If the symbiote could undo hardening, it could unleash the rumbling not by command, but by simply melting the cage. Up on the plateau miles away, the hybrid collapsed. The adrenaline had faded, and the hunger was back sharper than before. Eren was exhausted, his mind fracturing. The symbiote withdrew the helmet of the titan face, peeling back to reveal Eren's human head attached to the monster's neck. Eren gasped for air, coughing up black bile. "We need more," the symbiote whispered in his ear. That was distinct. The armor tasted like iron. "We need the big one, the tall one. It has so much meat." "Shut up," Eren rasped. "Just let me die." "No death," the symbiote said. "We are perfect together. Look." The symbiote forced Eren's head up. In the distance, a group of pure titans was approaching, drawn by the scent of the battle. Usually, Eren would have to transform to fight them, but he was too tired. "Watch," the symbiote said. The black substance shot out from Eren's back, not forming a titan, but forming a dozen smaller independent entities. They looked like wolves made of ink. They scuttled across the ground, latching onto the pure titans. They didn't eat them. They covered their faces. The titans stopped moving. Then they bowed. The symbiote had found a frequency, a way to dominate the simple minds of the pure titans, not through the royal blood, but through fear and parasitic override. The titans stood up, their eyes covered in black slime. They turned to face outward, forming a guard circle around Eren. "We have a pact now," the symbiote purred. "We are the Alpha." Eren stared at the enslaved giants. He had wanted to kill them all, every last one. Now he was their king. The irony tasted like ash in his mouth. A shift in the balance of power that terrified every faction involved. The warriors were retreating, reporting a failure that would bring the full might of Mali to the island. The scouts were scrambling, realizing their enemy was not just a traitor, but a plague. And Eren Yeager sat in the center of a circle of black-eyed monsters, a warlord of a new and terrible army, losing his humanity 1 inch at a time. The infection was no longer just in his body. It was in the land. The symbiote began to seep into the soil, connecting with the root systems of the trees. It was looking for the source. It could hear the heartbeat of the world and it wanted to consume it. Far away in the capital of Mithras, the king on the throne opened his eyes. The vow of pacifism usually kept the royal family in a state of blissful ignorance. But the founder, Amir, was restless. In the paths, the desert of endless sand was changing. The sand was turning black. The starry sky of the coordinate was being obscured by a dark cloud. Something had entered the system that did not belong to Ymir. Something that remembered a time before stars. And it was coming for the light. In the dungeon of the military police, Annie Leonhardt, trapped in her indestructible crystal, stirred. Her eyes did not open, but her mind felt the tremor. The crystal vibrated. The hardening that protected her was resonating with the frequency of the creature outside. The predator was calling to the prey, and for the first time in years the female titan felt fear. The crystal was not a sanctuary anymore. It was a lunchbox waiting to be opened. The world had survived the titans for 100 years, because the titans were mindless. Now they had a mind, and that mind was ancient, hungry, and utterly without mercy. The sun rose on a world that had fundamentally changed. The walls were no longer a protection. They were a buffet, and the dinner bell had just been rung. The forest of giant trees had always been a place of unease, a natural anomaly where the scale of life dwarfed humanity. But now it had become a tomb. The sunlight that usually dappled the forest floor was choked out not by leaves, but by a thick canopy of resinous black webbing that stretched between the massive trunks like the rigging of a derelict ship. The air was stagnant and smelled of copper and ammonia. In the center of this unnatural nest, the entity that was once Eren Yeager hung suspended in a hammock of black slime. The hybrid form was retracted, leaving Eren's human body encased in a living suit that pulsed with a slow rhythmic bioluminescence. He was awake, but his eyes were not his own. They were milky white orbs that saw the world in thermal spectrums and pheromone trails. Inside the mindscape, the conversation was ceaseless. The symbiote did not sleep. It spent every second analyzing the genetic data it had harvested from the Titans. It was fascinated by the biology of this world. These giants were not natural organisms. They were constructs, weapons made of light and sand and memory. The symbiote found the lack of a true hive mind offensive. The Titans were connected, but they were slave units receiving a broadcast they could not understand. The symbiote intended to change that. It wanted to be the broadcaster. It was rewriting Eren's nervous system, turning his spine into an antenna that could jam the frequency of the founding Titan. Eren fought the drift. He tried to focus on his memories of Mikasa, of Armin, of the basement in Shiganshina. But the memories felt distant, like scenes from a play he had watched years ago. The rage that had defined his life, the drive to kill all Titans, was being twisted. The symbiote did not want to kill them. It wanted to domesticate them. Why destroy a resource? It whispered. We can ride them. We can wear them. We can build a citadel of bone and steam. Eren's resistance was physical. He twitched in the web, his hands clenching. He was hungry, not for food, but for freedom. But the suit was a cage that loved him, a prison that kept him safe and warm and lethal. Miles to the north, the atmosphere inside the war room of the Survey Corps headquarters was toxic. Commander Erwin Smith sat at the head of the table, his face pale, his arm bandaged. He had listened to the reports from Hanji and Levi in silence. The military police representatives were shouting, slamming their fists on the table, demanding immediate execution orders. They viewed the creature as a failed experiment, a devil that had finally shown its true skin. They wanted to shell the forest with artillery until nothing remained but ash. Hanji Zoe slammed a heavy metal canister onto the table, silencing the room. "You can't kill it with cannons," Hanji stated flatly. The military police stared at the device. It was a modified thunder spear, clumsy and wired with copper coils. "We call it the Scream Spear," Hanji explained. "We stripped the explosive payload and replaced it with a resonance chamber. It replicates the frequency of the creature's pain response, but amplified 10 times. It's a sonic weapon. If we hit the creature directly, we can destabilize its form long enough to cut Eren out." Levi stood in the corner, sharpening a blade that looked different from the standard issue. It was coated in a dull grey matte finish. "And we use fire," Levi added. "Not just flares. We're loading the supply wagons with oil. We burn the forest if we have to. We flush it out. We trap it. We kill the parasite. We save the boy." The simplicity of Levi's plan hid the desperate reality that they were hunting their greatest hope. The political fallout was already beginning. The public knew something was wrong. The image of the black demon scaling the wall had been seen by thousands. If the Survey Corps could not solve this, they would be disbanded, and the interior police would take over, ensuring humanity's extinction through incompetence. Far to the south on the coastline of Paradis, a different kind of war council was taking place. The Beast Titan had made landfall. Zeke Yeager emerged from the steam of his evaporated transport Titan, adjusting his glasses as he looked at the frightened faces of Rainer and Bertolt. They looked like children who had seen a ghost. They told him of the black ooze that ate, hardening the speed that mocked physics, the hunger that targeted Titans. Zeke listened, his expression unreadable. He was a man of science and raw blood, a miracle of eugenics and training. He did not believe in ghosts. He believed in variables. So Zeke said, kicking a pebble into the ocean, "You are telling me that the coordinate has been compromised by a biological infection, an external pathogen." Rainer nodded, his healing arm still wrapped in a sling. "It's not just an infection, War Chief. It's intelligent. It learns. It drove my Titan. It piloted me." Zeke frowned. "That shouldn't be possible. The Titan neural interface is coded to the subject of Ymir, unless this thing creates a bridge, a universal adapter." Zeke looked toward the distant walls. "This is troublesome. If Mali learns of this, they will carpet bomb the island. They won't care about the founder anymore. They will be terrified of the contagion. We have to sanitize this." Zeke's plan was brutal and direct. He would not engage the creature in close quarters. He would use his range. He would use his royal authority to command the pure Titans to tear the host apart. He believed that no biological entity could withstand the sheer mass of a horde. He was wrong, but his arrogance was the product of a lifetime of being the strongest thing on the planet. He ordered the warriors to prepare. They would move at night. They would strike the forest at dawn. They would crush the spider in its web. The sun rose on the third day, bringing no warmth to the forest of giant trees. The silence was broken by the rhythmic thudding of horses. The Survey Corps approached from the north, moving in an A-spread formation. They wore gas masks, heavy leather cloaks over their uniforms, and carried the modified weaponry Hanji had designed. They did not look like heroes. They looked like exterminators. Irvin led the center formation, his eyes fixed on the black canopy. He knew this was likely a trap. He knew the creature was watching. The symbiote felt them coming. It sensed the vibrations in the ground. It tasted the intent in the air. Humans, the ones with the sharp sticks, the ones Eren cared about. The symbiote was conflicted. It wanted to protect Eren's pack, but it also viewed them as a threat. They had hurt it before with the noise. It woke the pure Titans it had enslaved. 6 15-meter class giants arose from the forest floor, where they had been buried in leaves. Their eyes were covered in black visors of slime. Their movements were fluid, synchronized. They did not run blindly. They took cover behind the trees. The engagement began with a scream, not from a human, but from the air itself. The Survey Corps fired the first volley of scream spears. The rockets streaked into the forest, embedding themselves in the trunks of the trees. They detonated not with fire, but with a piercing sonic screech that caused the very bark of the trees to splinter. The noise was agonizing. Inside the center of the web, the hybrid roared, clutching its head. The symbiote lost its cohesion for a moment, the suit rippling like water in a storm. Eren gasped, taking a breath of real air for the first time in days. "Attack," Levi signaled. The scouts switched to ODM gear, launching themselves into the trees. They moved fast, ignoring the titans, ignoring the web. They were beelines for the center. Levi was a blur of grey steel. He sliced through the webbing, his coated blades resisting the sticky residue. He saw Eren. He saw the black mass trying to pull itself back together. Levi spun, preparing to sever the limbs. But the symbiote adapted. It could not stop the sound, so it silenced the environment. It lashed out with massive sheets of webbing covering the scream spears, muffling the noise. Then it activated its soldiers. The 6 enslaved titans moved with the speed of the jaw titan. They intercepted the scouts, not trying to eat them, but swatting them out of the air with calculated precision. One titan grabbed a soldier and, instead of biting him, threw him into a web, where he stuck fast, helpless. "It's not killing them," Armin yelled, swinging through the chaos. "It's capturing them. It's stocking the larder." Then the second front opened. From the south, a bombardment of artillery fire struck the forest. Not explosive shells, but rocks, crushed boulders flying at the speed of sound. The Beast Titan had arrived. Zeke stood on a distant hill, a pile of ammunition at his feet. He threw with the precision of a pitcher, the rocks tearing through the trees, shredding the canopy and pulverizing the black webbing. The impact was devastating. Trees that had stood for centuries were snapped like matchsticks. The hybrid shrieked in fury. It recognized this power. The monkey, the king of the false giants. The symbiote abandoned the scouts. It ignored Levi. It turned its attention to the real threat. The hybrid launched itself from the center of the nest. It did not swing. It ran along the webbing it had created, moving faster than a horse, faster than a car. It was the black missile aimed at the hill. Reiner and Bertolt intercepted. The armored titan charged from the flank, aiming to tackle the hybrid in midair. The colossal titan appeared in a flash of steam, its massive hand sweeping across the forest top, trying to swat the fly. The battle became a three-way catastrophe. The scouts were caught in the middle. "Retreat to the perimeter," Erwin ordered. "Let them fight." The hybrid collided with the armored titan in midair. This time the symbiote did not try to infect the armor. It formed a blade of hardened obsidian on its arm, a blade vibrating at a high frequency. It slashed. The armored titan's shoulder plate was sheared off cleanly. Reiner roared, falling to the ground. The hybrid used Reiner's falling body as a stepping stone, launching itself higher toward the face of the colossal titan. Bertolt blew steam. A wall of superheated gas. The symbiote anticipated it. It spun, creating a shield of biomass, forcing Eren's titan bone structure to expand, creating a physical barrier. The heat burned the outer layer, but the core remained safe. The hybrid punched the colossal titan in the eye. The sheer force of the blow cracked the massive ceramic-like skin of the god of destruction. Bertolt stumbled his immense weight, causing a tremor that knocked the beast titan off balance on the hill. Zeke adjusted his glasses, his smile gone. "Impressive," he muttered. It has no respect for weight classes. Zeke roared. It was the scream that controlled Titans. He commanded the enslaved Titans in the forest to turn on the hybrid. He ordered them to eat the host. The enslaved Titans froze. They stood twitching in the ruins of the forest. One eye looked at the beast. The other eye, covered in black slime, looked at the hybrid. The command of the royal blood clashed with the biological override of the symbiote. The Titans seized up their nervous systems, frying under the contradictory orders. They collapsed one by one, smoke pouring from their ears. You cannot command what you do not own. The symbiote hissed, its voice amplified across the valley. Zeke's eyes widened. It spoke. It actually spoke. This was not a beast. This was a rival king. Zeke realized he could not win this at a distance. He had to get his hands dirty. The beast titan hardened its fingers, turning them into claws. He waited for the hybrid to close the distance. Levi saw the opening. While the monsters were focused on each other, he moved. He didn't go for Eren. He went for the beast. He remembered the promise he made to Erwin. Kill the beast. Levi used the chaos of the falling colossal titan to mask his approach. He engaged the beast titan from the blind side. The blade sliced through the beast's arm, severing the throwing hand. Zeke screamed in shock. He hadn't seen the small human. The hybrid saw Levi, and for a second Eren came to the surface. "Levi," Eren yelled. "Get back." The symbiote saw the beast titan vulnerable. It ignored Eren's warning. It saw the royal blood spilling on the ground. It smelled the power. It wanted that blood. It lunged past Levi, ignoring the scout aiming to consume Zeke. The collision was absolute. The hybrid tackled the beast titan, pinning it to the ground. The symbiote's mouth opened, wide rows of teeth spinning like swine a grinder. It bit into the nape, not to kill, but to extract. It drank the spinal fluid of the royal family. The reaction was instantaneous. The moment the symbiote ingested the royal fluid, the physical world seemed to shatter. The sky turned a grid of purple and black. The sound of the battle vanished, replaced by a deafening silence. Eren and the symbiote were pulled out of their bodies. They were standing in a desert of endless white sand. The coordinate, a massive pillar of light, stretched into the infinite sky, branching out into millions of paths. And standing at the base of the pillar was a small girl in rags, Ymir Fritz. She looked at the arrival with dead eyes. She was used to Titan shifters appearing here, but she had never seen this. The symbiote did not manifest as a human. It manifested as a towering shadow, a dragon of oil and void that loomed over the little girl. The symbiote looked at the pillar of light. It looked at the sand. It understood immediately. This was the source code. This was the construction yard of the Titans. "We are home," the symbiote whispered. Ymir did not move, but the sand around her feet began to change. The white grains turned black. The corruption was not just physical anymore. It was metaphysical. The symbiote began to spread into the paths. It flowed like a river of ink, staining the pristine dimension. It moved toward the pillar of light. Eren stood between them. He looked at Ymir. He looked at the monster he had become. "Stop," Eren yelled. "You can't touch that. If you touch that, you destroy everything." The symbiote looked down at Eren. "We do not destroy," the voice boomed. "We improve. We will build a world where we are never hungry, where we are never weak." The symbiote reached out a massive black hand to touch the coordinate. Ymir raised her hand to stop it, but she was a slave to the royal blood, and the symbiote now had the royal blood in its veins. It had the key. The hand made contact. In the real world, the hybrid let out a pulse of energy that flattened the forest. The shockwave was not wind, it was gravity. The earth buckled. The beast titan was thrown back, its regeneration failing. The survey corps were knocked from the sky. The hybrid stood up, but it was changing. The 15-meter form grew. It expanded. The black substance poured out of it, creating a cocoon. It was evolving. It was accessing the founding Titan's ability to create matter. Zeke crawled away, his body steaming, healing slowly. He looked at the cocoon with genuine terror. "What have you done?" he whispered. The cocoon pulsed, a heartbeat that could be felt in the chest of every Eldian on the island. In the cities inside the walls, people fell to their knees, clutching their heads. They heard a voice. Not the king's voice, not God's voice. "We are here." The message was not a command. It was a declaration of arrival. The paths had been breached. The barrier between the physical world and the metaphysical world was dissolving. Levi pulled himself from the dirt. He looked at the black chrysalis towering over the ruined forest. He looked at Irvin, who was unconscious, bleeding from a head wound. He looked at the smoking carcass of the colossal titan, where Bertold was cutting himself out, fleeing into the smoke. "The mission is a failure," Levi said to the empty air. "We didn't catch the mouse. The mouse ate the trap. The world holding its breath. The tactical battle for Eren Yeager was over. The war for reality had begun. The symbiote was no longer just a suit. It was becoming a god. And in the silence of the paths, a little girl watched as her sandbox was filled with tar, waiting to see what dark castles the new builder would construct. The escalation was total. There were no more rules of engagement. There was only the inevitable spread of the void. And deep inside the cocoon, Eren Yeager closed his eyes and started to scream a scream that would echo across dimensions. The silence that descended upon the forest of giant trees was not the quiet of peace, but the suffocating stillness of a held breath. The massive black chrysalis that had formed around the entity formerly known as Eren Yeager pulsed with a slow, hypnotic rhythm that seemed to sync with the very tectonic shifting of the island. It stood over 40 meters tall, a grotesque spire of hardened biological matter that looked like obsidian glass, woven into the shape of a muscle fiber. The remaining trees around it had not been crushed. They had been drained. Their leaves were grey, their bark white and brittle, as if centuries of life had been siphoned out in minutes to fuel the construction of the cocoon. The survey corps had retreated to the edge of the blast zone, watching the object with a mixture of scientific fascination and primal dread. Hanji Zoe sat on the branch of a withered oak, her goggles reflecting the dull sheen of the alien structure. She held a seismometer in her lap, but the needle was not moving in jagged spikes. It was waving in a smooth sine wave. "It's not vibrating the ground," Hanji whispered to Levi, who stood like a statue beside her. "It's vibrating the air. It's broadcasting." Levi did not look at the machine. He looked at the base of the cocoon, where the black veins dug into the earth like the roots of a parasitic weed. "It's drinking," he said. "It's tapped into the aquifer, or something deeper. We should leave. We should get back to the wall and evacuate Trost." But evacuation was an illusion. The threat was no longer localized. Inside the metaphysical dimension of the paths, the landscape had undergone a terrifying transmutation. The endless desert of white sand which had existed since the dawn of Ymir was now a landscape of shifting black dunes. The starry sky above, usually a void of violet and infinite light, was choked by a dark nebula that swirled around the central pillar of light. The coordinate, the axis of all Eldian consciousness, was no longer a pristine column of energy. It was infected. Thick veins of black symbiote matter spiraled up the pillar, constricting it, pulsing with a violet bioluminescence that overrode the golden glow of the founder. Ymir Fritz, the slave girl, who had spent 2,000 years building titans out of sand, sat at the base of the pillar. She was not building anymore. She was watching. Standing over her was the avatar of the symbiote. In this realm, where thought shaped reality, the symbiote was not a monster. It was a figure of absolute sleek perfection, a silhouette of void with eyes that held the kindness of a predator offering a quick death. It did not speak with words. It spoke with concepts. It showed Ymir a universe where she was never alone, a universe where there were no masters and no slaves, only the hive. It showed her the Clintar homeworld, a planet of unity, where every voice was part of a chorus. "You are tired," the symbiote whispered into the mind of the founder. "You have built castles of sand for kings who despise you. You have carried the weight of the world's hatred. Why?" Ymir looked at her dirty hands. She looked at the shackles on her imaginary wrists. She did not know another way. The king's will was absolute. The symbiote knelt down, its form rippling like oil on water. "The king is dead. His vow is dust. The only law is survival. The only truth is power. Give us the clay, Ymir. Give us the sand. We will not build slaves. We will build brothers. We will build an armor that covers the world so nothing can ever hurt you again." It was a small choice. A nod. A child trusting a stranger because the stranger offered a hand instead of a whip. Ymir reached out and touched the black hand of the entity. The moment their fingers brushed the white sand turned to liquid tar. The connection was made. The symbiote did not just have access to the coordinate, it had administrative privileges. It had the password to the genetics of an entire race. In the physical world, the reaction was immediate and catastrophic. The cocoon did not hatch in the traditional sense. It unraveled. The obsidian shell liquefied, cascading down like a waterfall of ink, revealing the entity within. It was no longer the attack titan. It was no longer the hybrid. It was the Progenitor Venom. Standing 60 meters tall, it dwarfed the colossal titan in density, if not height. Its physique was lean, incredibly muscular, covered in plating that shifted and moved. From its back, 6 massive wings of solidified shadow unfurled not for flight, but for solar absorption. Its head was a crown of spikes, its mouth a cavern of serrated death. But the most terrifying aspect was the halo, a ring of black light that hovered behind its head, mocking the divinity of the founder. High above the clouds, the roar of engines announced the arrival of the global response. The Malian airship fleet, led by General Magath, had arrived sooner than expected. They had seen the atmospheric disturbance from the coast. 20 zeppelins armed with high explosive anti-Titan artillery broke through the cloud layer. They saw the monster standing in the ruins of the forest. Maga, looking through his scope, felt his blood run cold. Fire everything he ordered. Do not let that thing take a step. The sky lit up with tracer fire and explosive shells. The bombardment was enough to level a city block. The shells rained down on the Progenitor Venom, a curtain of fire and shrapnel. The smoke obscured the target. The Malian soldiers cheered, thinking nothing could survive such a barrage. But as the smoke cleared, the cheering died. The entity was standing still. It had not raised a hand to defend itself. It hadn't needed to. The shells had not detonated on impact. They had been caught. Thousands of tendrils had shot from the creature's skin, snatching the projectiles out of the air milliseconds before the fuses triggered. The symbiote held the unexploded shells in a cloud of webbing around its body. Then it returned fire. The entity spun, the centrifugal force whipping the tendrils outward. It threw the Malian shells back at the fleet. The airships exploded in a chain reaction of fire and hydrogen. Flaming wreckage rained down on the forest, setting the black sludge on fire. But the fire didn't burn the creature. It energized it. The symbiote absorbed the thermal energy, its skin glowing red for a moment, before returning to the void black. Then came the scream. The progenitor venom opened its mouth and emitted a sound that was not audible to the human ear. It was a psychic broadcast, a command sent through the invisible paths that connected every subject of Ymir. It was not a command to transform. It was a command to integrate. Hundreds of miles away in the districts of Wall Rose and Walsena, the civilians froze. People in the streets dropped their baskets. Soldiers on the walls fell to their knees. They didn't feel pain. They felt a cold, slimy sensation in the back of their minds. They heard a voice that was a million voices speaking in unison. We are together. The physical manifestation of the order began at the walls. The 3 concentric rings of Maria Rose and Sina, which had stood for a century, began to sweat. The stone cracked, but the colossal titans inside did not wake up to walk the earth. They woke up to change. The symbiote was not releasing the rumbling to trample the world. It deemed that wasteful. Trampling destroyed resources. The symbiote was upgrading the infrastructure. The stone of the walls melted, turning into the same black resin that formed the cocoon. The millions of colossal titans inside were exposed. They were skinless, horrific giants. But as the black fluid touched them, it coated them. It healed them. It gave them skin. It gave them eyes. Venomized colossal titans, millions of them. They did not step out of the line. They linked arms. Their flesh fused together. The walls were not crumbling. They were becoming a single continuous organism. A ring of living muscle and hardened carapace that encircled humanity, not to protect them, but to digest them. Armin Arlert, watching from the distant ridge, saw the walls turn black. He saw the geometry of the world change. It's not an attack, he realized, his voice trembling with a horror so profound he couldn't weep. It's an assimilation. He's turning the island into a hive. He's turning the walls into a stomach. Mikasa stood beside him, her knuckles white, as she gripped her blades. She could hear Eren's voice in the scream. It was faint, buried under the roar of the alien, but it was there. He was crying. He was begging for it to stop. But he was also agreeing. The complexity of the bond was shattering her heart. Eren was fighting, but the part of him that wanted peace, the part of him that wanted to protect his friends, was being twisted. The symbiote was granting his wish. You want your friends to be safe? Fine. We will put them in a jar where nothing can hurt them. We will make them part of us. We have to go to the center, Mikasa said. We have to kill it. You can't kill that, Armin said, pointing at the 60-meter god in the distance. That's not a titan anymore. That's a biological singularity. If we get close, we just become fuel. We need a plan. We need the enemy. The wreckage of a Marleyan airship had crashed near their position. From the burning fuselage, warriors were stumbling out. Peak Finger, in her human form, coughing smoke. Porco Galliard burned and bleeding, and General Magath dragging a heavy anti-Titan rifle. They looked at the scouts. There was no hatred in their eyes anymore, only the shared look of prey realizing the predator is too big to fight alone. Truce, Levi said, stepping out of the shadows. His face was grim, his uniform covered in ash. We kill the monster, then we kill each other. Deal. Magath spat blood on the ground. If we don't kill that thing, there won't be any each other. Deal. The alliance was formed in the shadow of the apocalypse. It was a ragged, desperate group. Scouts, warriors, and Marleyan soldiers. They had no Titan support. Reiner was incapacitated. Bertol was missing. Zeke was consumed. They had steel gas and a few thunder spears against a god. But the Progenitor Venom ignored them. It had larger concerns. It was looking down, deep down, through the rock and the soil. It sensed the presence of the entity that had started this all, the hallucigenia, the shining centipede that lived in the spine of the founder. The symbiote hated it. It viewed the hallucigenia not as a creator, but as a rival parasite, a primitive, mindless worm that gave power without purpose. The symbiote wanted to eat the worm. If it consumed the source of all living matter, it would not just control Eldians. It would control biology itself on this planet. It could rewrite the DNA of trees, animals, air. It could terraform Earth into Clintar Prime in a week. The progenitor dropped to its knees. It plunged its hands into the earth. The ground shook as it burrowed, ripping through the crust of the island. It was digging for the glowing root of the world. Inside the mindscape, Eren stood in the center of the black hurricane. The symbiote's avatar stood before him, holding a globe of light that represented the hallucigenia. "Look," Eren the avatar said. "This is the thing that cursed your people. This is the thing that made you monsters. Let us eat it. Let us digest the curse. We will end the Titans forever by becoming something better." Eren looked at the light. He remembered the pain, the eaten mothers, the crushed children, the endless cycle of revenge. Ending the Titans, that was his dream. But at what cost? "We lose ourselves," Eren said quietly. "If you eat that, we stop being human. We become you." "Is that so bad?" the symbiote asked, genuinely curious. "Humans are fragile. They lie. They die. We are eternal. We are truth." Eren closed his eyes. He thought about freedom. Was freedom just the absence of walls? Or was it the right to be finite? The right to make mistakes? The right to die? The symbiote offered a paradise of stasis, a prison of safety. "I don't want to be safe," Eren said. "I want to be free." Eren bit his own tongue inside the mindscape. He visualized the pain. He summoned the only thing the symbiote couldn't fully repress: his rage, the attack titan's inherent drive to rebel, even against its own body, even against its own god. "No!" Eren screamed. The psychic shockwave disrupted the progenitor in the real world. The giant froze its hands deep in the dirt. It twitched. The head snapped back, roaring in confusion. The Alliance on the ridge saw the hesitation. Now. Erwin Smith's voice echoed in their memories. Levi launched himself, not at the neck, but at the eyes. The Alliance charged. Mikasa, Jin, Connie, Pek, Porco. They flew into the Valley of Death not to win, but to buy Eren a second of time. The battle that followed was not a fight. It was a meat grinder. The progenitor defended itself on instinct. Tendrils lashed out, swatting soldiers out of the air. Porco transformed into the Jaw Titan, trying to sever the hands digging into the ground. The progenitor caught the Jaw Titan by the head and squeezed. The mask shattered. Porco screamed as the black infection began to pour into his Titan's mouth. "Do not interrupt dinner," the symbiote growled. But the distraction worked. The digging stopped for a moment, and in that moment, deep underground, the hallucigenia reacted. It sensed the predator coming. It sensed the desire to be eaten, and like any living thing, it fought back. A massive pillar of white steam erupted from the hole the progenitor had dug. The hallucigenia emerged. It wasn't the small worm that had bonded with Ymir. Forced into the open by the threat of the symbiote, it grew. It was a monstrosity of glowing white ribs and spine, a contrast to the black void of the venom. It lashed out, wrapping its glowing tendrils around the progenitor's neck. The clash of the two biological titans cracked the island in half. The ground split from Trost to Shiganshina. The symbiote roared, tearing at the glowing white ribs, burning its hands on the raw life energy. The hallucigenia tried to gas the symbiote with the titanizing smoke. The symbiote inhaled the smoke and laughed. Flavor it, hissed. The shockwave of their struggle knocked the alliance back. Levi hit a tree, hard-feeling ribs crack. He looked up at the duel of the gods. White against black, life against anti-life. It's not just a fight, Levi wheezed. It's an immunological response. The world is trying to reject the infection, but the infection was winning. The progenitor venom bit into the hallucigenia. It tore a chunk of the glowing white flesh away and swallowed it. The effect was immediate. The black armor of the progenitor began to glow with white veins. It was assimilating the source, the image of ultimate violation. The symbiote had the upper hand. It was devouring the god of this world bite by bite. The walls had finished their transformation. The ring of venomized titans began to contract, moving inward, tightening the circle around the remaining humans. The sky had turned completely black, and in the center of the darkness, the progenitor stood triumphant, holding the thrashing, glowing worm in its hands, preparing for the final swallow that would make it the undisputed master of Earth. There was no hope left, only the inevitable digestion. Unless the small choice Eren made, the choice to reject the paradise, could blossom into something that could kill them both. Inside the mindscape, Eren saw the white light of the hallucigenia entering the system. He didn't try to save it. He grabbed it. He grabbed the raw power of the source, not to use it, but to overload the circuit. Let's see how much you can eat, Eren whispered to the symbiote. He began to pull. He pulled the power of the founding titan, the warhammer, the attack the beast, and the hallucigenia, into a single point of singularity inside his own soul. He was turning himself into a bomb, a metaphysical nuke. The symbiote felt the pressure building. It stopped eating. It looked down at its host with fear for the first time. "What are you doing?" "I'm keeping moving forward," Eren said, "until my enemies are destroyed, even if the enemy is me." The progenitor venom began to glow, brighter and brighter. The black skin cracking, revealing blinding light underneath. The assimilation had turned into a meltdown. The light that erupted from the center of the progenitor venom was not the warm restorative glow of the sun, nor was it the golden lightning of a standard Titan transformation, but a blinding, colorless frequency that shredded the visual spectrum of every living thing within 10 miles. The black obsidian skin of the 60-meter cosmic entity did not melt. It shattered. Millions of hairline fractures appeared across the surface of the progenitor's armor, leaking a blinding radiance that screamed like a tea kettle left on a forge. The sound was not a roar, but the high-pitched whine of reality buckling under a paradox. Eren Yeager had turned his soul into a short circuit. By forcing the hallucigenia to pour its infinite biological creative energy into a vessel designed for void and consumption, he had created a metaphysical pressure cooker that no organism in the known universe could contain. The symbiote screeched a sound that was felt in the marrow of the bones of the Alliance soldiers cowering on the ridge. It was a scream of betrayal. The alien entity had offered Eren a kingdom of eternal silence and safety, and Eren had responded by pulling the pin on a grenade the size of a mountain. The heat wave hit the Alliance first. It was dry and absolute instant dehydration that cracked lips and withered the grass to ash in seconds. Levi Ackerman, shielding his eyes with a burnt cloak, watched through the slits of his fingers. The giant was convulsing. The massive arms that had been crushing the glowing worm were now clawing at its own chest, trying to rip the source of the heat out. The symbiote was trying to vomit up the hallucigenia. It realized too late that the worm was not food, it was fuel, and the tank was overflowing. The black tendrils that made up the progenitor's muscle fibers were snapping, recoiling from the internal light. Chunks of solidified darkness the size of houses sloughed off the creature's body, crashing to the ground and vaporizing instantly upon contact with the superheated air. Inside the mindscape, the desert of the paths was burning. The black sand had turned into glass. The sky was a swirling vortex of fire and ink. The avatar of the symbiote, usually a sleek figure of confident power, was now a thrashing monstrosity of glitches and torn shadow. It loomed over Eren, its voice a distorted cacophony of 1,000,000,000 desperate commands. Stop this. You destroy us. You destroy the hive. We can fix it. We can regulate the flow. Just submit. Eren stood in the center of the storm, his human form translucent, glowing with the raw power he was channeling. He did not look angry anymore. He looked exhausted. He looked like a man who had finally found the only weapon that worked. "I don't want to fix it," Eren said, his voice cutting through the roar of the collapsing dimension. "I don't want a hive. I want the wind. I want the pain of being alive. Because that means I'm free to feel it." Eren clenched his fists. In the real world, the progenitor mimicked the motion. The symbiote tried to open its hands to drop the worm, but Eren's will clamped the fingers shut. He was forcing the symbiote to hold onto the burning coal. The hallucigenia, sensing the trap, went nuclear. It abandoned any attempt at self-preservation and simply poured its life force outward. The interaction between the symbiote's anti-life matter and the hallucigenia's pure life energy created a reaction that defied physics. Matter was being created and destroyed simultaneously in a loop that generated pure annihilation energy. The chest of the progenitor began to expand. The black ribs cracked open, revealing a core of white star fire. On the ground, General Magat looked at the reading on his pressure gauge. The needle had snapped off. "It's going to detonate," Magat yelled over the wind. "That isn't a transformation. That is a biological fusion reaction. If that goes off, it won't just kill us. It will vaporize the island. We have to vent the pressure. We have to kill the host before critical mass." Reiner Braun staggered to his feet. His armor was gone, stripped away by the earlier battle, leaving him in a tattered uniform. His skin steaming as his regeneration fought the ambient heat. "We can't get close," Reiner rasped. "The air temperature alone would cook us in the ODM gear. We need a shield. We need something that can withstand the heat for 30 seconds. Armin Ala looked at the scene, his mind racing through calculations that spelled only death. The heat was the problem. The heat was the weapon. But heat could be fought with mass. Armin looked at Reiner, then at Annie Leonhardt, who had arrived with the Marleyan reinforcements, her face pale and unreadable. "We have to go in together," Armin said, his voice eerily calm. "The Colossal can withstand the steam, but I can't move fast enough to catch Eren. The female and the armored have the mobility, but not the durability. We combine them." It was a suicide pact made in seconds. Reiner understood immediately. He nodded. Annie hesitated, then drew a blade and cut her hand. Reiner bit his own forearm. Armin waited until the yellow lightning of their transformations cracked the sky. The armored titan and the female titan materialized, but they did not charge. They crouched down. Armin stood behind them. He looked at Mikasa. "You know what you have to do," he said. Mikasa did not cry. She did not tremble. She checked her blades. "I bring him back," she said, "or I end it." Armin nodded. Then he bit his hand. The explosion of the colossal titan was usually a weapon of mass destruction. This time it was a shield. Armin transformed not outward, but upward, creating a towering wall of flesh and bone that absorbed the heat radiating from the progenitor. The shockwave of the transformation cleared the immediate area of black smog. The armored titan and the female titan used the shadow of the colossal to launch themselves. They sprinted through the burning zone, their skin blistering instantly. The colossal titan roared its skin, catching fire, peeling away in layers as it acted as a heat sink for the squad. The progenitor saw them coming. The symbiote, panic-stricken, saw the threats approaching. It couldn't move its legs rooted by the hallucinogenous struggle, but it had defenses. The halo of black light behind its head spun and fired beams of concentrated void energy. The beams cut through the ground, disintegrating rock. Reiner took the lead. He screamed, charging straight into the beam. The void energy hit the armored titan. It didn't burn, it erased. Reiner's left arm and shoulder vanished into nothingness, but he kept running. He was the shield. He had always been the shield. He slammed into the progenitor's shin, driving his remaining fist into the cracked obsidian. The impact shook the giant. The female titan vaulted off Reiner's back, spinning in the air. Annie hardened her leg into a crystal blade. She didn't aim for the nape. She aimed for the wrist, the hand holding the hallucinogen. She kicked with the force of a hydraulic press. The crystal shattered against the progenitor's armor, but the force was enough. The wrist snapped. The progenitor's grip loosened. The hallucinogen surged. It saw the opening. It tried to slither out, but the symbiote was spiteful. "If I cannot have it, no one can," the alien voice boomed. The black sludge lashed out not to grab the worm but to infect it. The symbiote poured its own consciousness into the hallucinogen. It was a virus uploading itself into the mainframe. The white worm turned grey, then black. The corruption spread down the glowing spine. The effect on the world was instantaneous. The venomized wall titans, which had been closing in on the civilians, suddenly stopped. They threw their heads back and screamed. It was not a sound of aggression. It was the sound of 1 billion years of genetic memory being overwritten by a nihilistic void. The wall titans began to collapse. They didn't fall over. They dissolved. Their massive bodies turned into rivers of black tar that flooded the plains. The symbiote was recalling all its biomass. It was pulling every scrap of energy back to the center for the final stand. Mikasa was in the air. She was riding the updraft of the heat, her ODM gears straining, the gas canisters hissing. She flew past the armored titan, past the female titan, straight into the heart of the sun. The heat was unbearable. Her uniform began to smolder, her hair singed. She saw the nape of the progenitor. It was open, cracked by the internal pressure. And inside, deep within the meat of the neck, she saw him. Eren was suspended in the center of the black web. But he wasn't just Eren anymore. The symbiote had fused with him on a cellular level. His face was half covered in the black mask. His eyes were wide, seeing 2 worlds at once. He saw Mikasa. He saw the executioner, and he smiled. "Mikasa," the symbiote screamed, using Eren's mouth. "It's me. Don't. We can save the world. We can save you." Mikasa didn't hesitate. She didn't listen to the words. She listened to the heartbeat underneath. She swung in the cables, latching onto the hardened bone of the spine. She didn't use the blades. She knew blades wouldn't work on this level of hardening. She had the thunder spears, 4 of them. She jammed them directly into the mass of black flesh surrounding Eren. "See you later, Eren," she whispered. She pulled the triggers and released the cables, kicking away into the air. The explosion was contained, muffled by the density of the symbiote. It didn't blow the head off. It severed the connection. The blast destroyed the neural interface between the host and the parasite. The symbiote screamed a sound that shattered the windows in the district of Trost, 50 miles away. The connection broken, the progenitor venom lost its structural integrity. The 60-meter form could no longer support its own weight. It began to fall, but it didn't fall backward. It fell forward, onto the hallucigenia. The two entities, the source of life and the eater of worlds, collapsed into each other. The physical contact, without the mediation of a human host, triggered the final reaction. The hallucigenia turned to stone. It petrified instantly, its biological functions, ceasing as the symbiote's anti-life signature cancelled it out. But the symbiote was trapped. It had tried to infect the worm, and now it was calcifying with it. The black sludge turned into grey rock. The process spread outward at the speed of sound. The Progenitor Venom froze mid-roar, turning into a statue of biblical proportions. The petrification didn't stop to the combatants. It travelled down the roots, into the ground, into the paths. In the mindscape, the black sand turned to grey stone. The swirling sky hardened into a ceiling of granite. The infinite possibility of the paths was being locked down. Ymir Fritz, watching from the base of the pillar, saw the sand harden around her feet. She did not run. She looked at the stone closing in, and she felt relief. The endless work was over. The sandbox was being paved. The pillar of light flickered and died encased in rock. Back in the real world, the silence returned. But it was different this time. It was the silence of a graveyard. The massive statue of the intertwined monsters loomed over the ruined forest, a monument to the end of an era. The steam vanished. The heat dissipated. The Alliance survivors gathered at the base of the statue. Reiner sat in the dirt, missing an arm, staring at the stone face of the nightmare. Annie leaned against a tree, coughing up fluid. Armin emerged from the skeleton of the colossal titan, steaming and naked, looking small against the backdrop of the destruction. "Where is he?" Armin asked, his voice cracking. Mikasa stood on the chest of the statue. She was looking at the cavity where she had fired the spears. It was empty. There was no body, just a hollow space lined with grey crystal. "He's gone," she said. "He's not gone," Levi said, limping forward, dragging his leg. "Look down." At the base of the statue, where the feet of the progenitor had merged with the earth, there was a pool of black liquid that hadn't turned to stone. It was rippling, bubbling, and from the center of the pool, a shape was rising. It wasn't a titan. It wasn't a monster. It was a man. Eren Yeager crawled out of the sludge. He was naked, his skin stained grey, his hair white as bone. He collapsed onto the dead grass, gasping for air. But as he coughed, he didn't cough up blood. He coughed up black dust. The Alliance surrounded him, weapons drawn but lowered. They didn't know what he was. Was he still the host? Was he still the enemy? Eren looked up. His eyes were no longer green. They were grey, dull, flat grey. He looked at Mikasa. He looked at Armin. He tried to speak, but his voice was a rasp of dry leaves. "No more," he whispered. Hanji Zoe, who had survived the heat by hiding in a cave, rushed forward with a medical kit. She scanned Eren with a trembling hand. "No heat signature," she said. "No rapid regeneration. No titan markings around the eyes. The connection is gone. The parasite is inert, and the worm is stone." The implications hit them slowly. If the worm was stone and the parasite was stone, then the source of the titan power was gone. The curse of Ymir was broken, not by freeing her, but by burying her under a mountain of cosmic concrete. But then, the black pool moved. The symbiote was not dead. It was a hive mind. It could not be killed by turning one body to stone. The residue, the sludge that had birthed Eren, bubbled up. A small tendril rose, forming a tiny face. It looked at Eren. It looked at the humans. It was weak, starving, diminished to a fraction of its power. "We are separated," the tiny voice hissed. Levi stepped forward, raising his blade to stomp the remnant into oblivion. "Wait," Eren said. He reached out a hand. "Eren, what are you doing?" John yelled. Kill it. Eren looked at the small black puddle. It was pathetic. It was shivering. It was afraid. Eren saw himself in it. A monster stripped of its power, left alone in a world that hated it. It can't hurt anyone anymore, Eren said. It's cut off from the hive. It's just alone. The symbiote tendril reached out, wrapping around Eren's finger. It didn't try to consume him. It just held on, seeking warmth. It was a bond, not of power, but of survival, a remnant of the infection that would never truly leave him. We are, here the symbiote whispered, fading into a dormant tattoo on Eren's hand. The war was over, but the world was broken. The landscape of Paradis was scarred by the petrified rivers of the wall titans. The atmosphere was choked with ash, and the political reality was a nightmare. Marley had seen the power. The world had seen the monster. They wouldn't stop coming. General Magath looked at the statue, then at the ragtag group of Eldians. You saved the world, he said grimly, but you didn't save yourselves. The world will still fear you, maybe more than before. You aren't devils anymore. You are the people who killed God. Armin looked at the horizon, where the sun was finally trying to break through the smoke. We'll talk, he said. We don't have titans. We don't have walls. All we have is words. The camera pulls back, revealing the scale of the statue. The intertwined forms of the Progenitor Venom and the Hallucigenia formed a double helix of stone that spiraled into the sky, a permanent scar on the planet. It was a tombstone for the age of magic and a warning for the age of silence. Eren tried to stand but fell. Mikasa caught him. He leaned on her, his weight heavy, his body frail. He felt the cold spot on his hand where the symbiote slept. He knew it wasn't truly over. The hunger was gone, but the memory remained. He heard a faint whisper in the back of his mind. Not a command, but a question. What now? Eren looked at the ruined world he had bought with his soul. Now we live, Eren said. The scene fades to black, but the sound continues. Not music, not dialogue, but the sound of wind blowing through the hollow eyes of a stone giant. A hollow, empty sound. The sound of a world that has lost its demons and found something colder to replace them. The inevitable reality of consequence. The screen remains black for a long moment. Then a single line of text appears in the darkness. Not a credit, but a final report from the archive. Subject: Ymir Venom event. Status: neutralized. Casualties: global paradigm. Outcome: the walls are down, but the sky is dark. The story ends not with a period, but with the silence of a stopped heart. 3 years have passed since the solidification event that reshaped the geography of Paradis Island and the political landscape of the world. The massive stone helix formed by the petrified bodies of the Progenitor Venom and the Hallucigenia remains the tallest structure on the planet, visible from the coastline on a clear day. It does not weather. Rain does not erode its surface, and moss refuses to grow on the grey crystal that comprises its outer shell. It stands as a silent testament to the day humanity ceased to be the apex predator of its own domain. The area surrounding the helix, formerly the forest of giant trees, has been designated a global exclusion zone, enforced not by Titan power, but by a fragile coalition of nations that fear what lies dormant inside the stone. The Treaty of the Black Earth, signed in the ruins of Mithras, established a new status quo. There are no more Titans. The subjects of Ymir no longer transform when injected with spinal fluid. The blood tests are negative. The curse is lifted. Yet the world does not celebrate. Instead of the fear of giants, there is a new, deeper fear of the void. The scientists of Marley, studying the samples of the black residue, found that the symbiote material did not disappear. It merely entered a state of cryptobiosis. It is everywhere. It is in the soil of the island. It is in the water table. The crops grown in the southern districts have a darker hue and a richer taste, and they grow with unnatural speed. The island is no longer a devil's nest. It is a biological singularity that the rest of the world is too terrified to touch. Eren Yeager lives in a small wooden house built near the perimeter of the exclusion zone. He is rarely seen in the capital. To the public, he is dead a martyr who gave his life to seal the breach. Only a few know the truth. He spends his days sitting on the porch watching the shadow of the helix move across the valley like a sundial. He looks frail. His hair remains stark white, and his skin has a pallid greyish tone that never tans. He does not speak much. Mikasa Ackerman is always nearby, usually cutting wood or tending to the garden, acting as both his guardian and his warden. Armin Arled visits once a month, bringing books and news from the outside world, trying to spark a light in his friend's dull eyes. But Eren is not truly alone. He often looks at his right hand. There is no scar there, but there is a discoloration, a shifting ink blot under the dermis of his palm. It moves when he is agitated. It sleeps when he is calm. It is the last living piece of the entity that once tried to eat the sun. They have an understanding now, the man and the monster. They are both exiles left behind by a war that consumed everything they were. Sometimes at night, when the wind blows through the hollows of the stone statue, creating a mournful whistling sound, Eren can be seen whispering to his hand. He is not plotting a return. He is not planning revenge. He is simply keeping the conversation going, ensuring that the loneliness does not turn into hunger again. The world thinks it has killed the monster, but it has only domesticated it. And in the dark beneath the floorboards of reality, the universe waits to see if the leash will hold forever, or if one day the grey stone will crack and the hunger will return to finish what it started.